Good afternoon, everybody. So my name's John Schoonbee, and I work for a big financial company called Swiss Re. I'm giving a talk related to Swiss Re tomorrow, so I'll talk more about that then. But really what I want to do is just give a general welcoming introduction to the conference. Josephine asked me to do this, and to title it, We Have to Rethink. And I really believe that we do. So why are we here, right? So a lot of us have personal stories, right? So I go to a lot of conferences, and some of them are low-carb conferences. This is a different group of people. But often at the low-carb conferences, they talk about people having conversions, where they've been overweight or diabetic for a very long time, and then suddenly, magically, it disappears, right, when they go very low-carb or ketogenic. And so a shout out to Keto Mojo. I was in Denver, 3 months ago, and I'm a sugar addict, so I fall off the wagon every now and then. And I had, before that conference, it was quite bad. And so I went to the Denver conference, and I got a meter from Keto Mojo, and it's really helped me. And in the last 3 months, I've lost 10 kilograms without being hungry, just by... No, don't clap. It's happened before. But it just speaks to the power of what happens when you reduce carbohydrate, right? So we've got a lot of personal stories, and it's also personal stories around people who've been very ill and who've managed to improve their health. A lot of us are healers. I'm a medical doctor by profession. A lot of people here are medical doctors, right? That's what we want to do. We want to make people better. You speak to David Unwin in the UK, he wanted to retire because it was just so frustrating. He could do nothing. He couldn't heal anybody. It was the same story again and again. He now has continued practicing because he's seen how it's changed people's lives. Financial gain. And I think this is something we should talk about openly. Some people sell books, some people have devices, some people have programs. That's fine. We all have to make a living, right? So I work for a bigger insurance company. I get paid a salary, right? So yes, there is financial gain in this, and that is why some people are here. There's concern for individuals in society because things really have become quite bad out there, right? Really have become quite bad. And then, for me, there's a sense of fairness. And I'm really, and one of the people I respect a lot is Sarah Holberg. She works for Verta Health, a colleague of Steve Finney. And one of the things she's very strong about is choice, right? People should have a choice, right? So whether you want to go hiking up in the rain in the mountains, whether you want to go sledding in the dark, as some people do, which is quite dangerous, lots of fun, but quite dangerous, those are your choices, right? And if you want to eat ice cream and chocolate all day long, that's fine, that's your choice. But you need to know if you're diabetic or overweight or metabolically ill, what the right information is so that you can make that choice. And I don't think people do have that. And you'll see in one of the slides later, I'll refer to this sense of fairness or the lack thereof. And then the other final reason we're here is because somebody who cares a lot and who wants to make a difference, Josephine, got us here. So thank you very much. This was a quote that I saw a while back. The preservation of the means of knowledge among the lowest ranks is of more importance to the public than all the property of all the rich men in the country. And that goes back to what's fair. People need to know. And what is amazing about this, and it comes to my latest slides where it comes to commercial interest and money, is that there's so many people working on this stuff, so many doctors, specialists, cardiologists, oncologists, etc., looking at this, but it's so spread out. There's no collaboration, not intentional, but because there's no money behind it, right? There's just no money behind this. And what it then means is that the average person that you go out into the street who's having a trouble with their weight or is becoming diabetic, is pre-diabetic, and you say, what should you eat? They will all give you the wrong answer because that's the answer that's out there, right? And to me, this knowledge, the true knowledge that we should get out there so that people can make their own choices is what's so important, right? We're also here because NCDs are killing us. They are killing us. So you can see this WHO data. That's the whole world, and then you've got the Americas, which include South America, of course, Southeast Asia, and Europe. So if you look at the world, you can see 6 of the top 7 causes are NCD. In Europe, high socioeconomic country, 9 out of the top 10, right? So why are these NCDs killing us? Heart disease, cancer, etc. Well, one of the reasons that my colleagues, the actuaries that I work with, will tell you, well, people are getting older. You've got to die of something, right? So here you can see this graph. I will focus on a different area of this graph, but you can see life expectancy in the US is increasing. This is the expected remaining years of life for a 65-year-old female, I think. Yeah, female. So this is from 1900 to 2000, and you could see that on average, it was a 65-year-old would live another 12 years. And then, you know, as medical advances, we got antibiotics, we realized people should brush their teeth, they should wash their hands, all those kinds of basic things. Mortality improved tremendously, so 65-year-old would live 15 years, 16 years, 17 years, and so it went up and continues to go up to a degree, right? And as people get older, they're more likely to get cancer, right? Cancer is a disease of age. But let's not forget the diabetes and obesity epidemic, right? So it's not just age. It's very much this and how it relates to the NCDs. The other thing is, so we treat some of these NCDs and we get people, and we cure some cancers, we get people to live longer, but is there any point to live longer if you're really sick? No. So you want people to have healthy aging, right? You want people to have good health, have an active part in society. And that's really important, this idea of healthy aging. It's not just about getting somebody to live longer. So if you look at the program and you look at kind of the key data out there, you know, diabetes is a big deal when it comes to ketogenic diets, cardiovascular disease, cancer, the neurodegenerative stuff, Alzheimer's, epilepsy. But there's a plus there, and the plus is there are a lot of other things that seem to improve. But do we have data on that? Is it anecdotal? How robust is that data, right? And this conference is very much going to focus on this, and of course it's all around metabolic disease and inflammation, right? A lot of these NCDs are caused by a background of inflammation. So I thought I'd focus on a couple of these. So cancer first. So this is just the percentage of new cases by age. And you can see, of course, as people get older, they start dying, so there are less of these people around to make up. But if you look at the percentage of new cases by age, you can see clearly cancer is a disease of age, right? This is SEER data, so US data, and this is females, this is males, that spike up there. Because anyone knows why we had that big spike in cancers in the late 80s? PSA testing, right? I can bore you with screening and how bad screening might be. It's not always bad, but very often it is bad. This is an example. Picked up lots of cancers, caused lots of damage, and saved no lives. And then, of course, you have this decrease, which is mostly due to smoking, right? So people realized smoking was bad. There were lots of campaigns to reduce smoking. It takes a long time for that to happen, so this is the tail. If you look at females, it's basically steady, march up, not much difference, right? So this is incidence, it's not mortality. Mortality has improved a little bit, So there are some cancers we are treating better, but not always. And we are picking them up earlier. And that's beneficial if you take something like cervical cancer, right? Or colon cancers. But you can see that we're not really having a big impact on, other than the smoking impact, on the incidence of cancers. So it's a disease of old ages. We're getting older. We're treating some of them more successfully, but the cost is astronomical, right? So this is ASCO post, so this is a cancer posting on expensive cancer drugs. And you can see in 2014, they basically, in 2011, it broke a $100,000 barrier for a therapy, right? And you can see Kymriah over here, which is the new CAR T-cell treatment from Novartis, $475,000. Single treatment, could be curative. So unbelievable science, unbelievable research, but very, very, very expensive, right? So we've got more of this condition, and the treatments are unbelievably expensive and, of course, not always successful, right? And then you can see public health systems like the NHS are stopping offering some of these drugs because they look at QALYs, quality adjusted life years, and they decide the cost per drug is not worth the saving at the end. And so some people can't get access to these drugs. So how does a ketogenic diet and cancer work? I'm not going to try and explain that. There are going to be far more eloquent people doing that this week. But of course, just to highlight a couple of things, there's the Warburg effect, right? So cancer cells tend to use aerobic glycolysis. It's very inefficient way to make energy, and it's something that we can almost leverage, right? So a lot of cancers cannot utilize ketones. So if you're on a ketogenic diet, you starve them of glucose, so they cannot use glucose, and of course their growth is stunted. And then by being on a ketogenic diet, you're lowering insulin and insulin-like growth factor, which are drivers often of cancer cell proliferation. So it kind of makes sense, right, from a biologically plausible mechanistic point of view. So then we've got diabetes and obesity. I was in India a few years ago in Bangalore, and it was unbelievable, the desserts that people were having, unbelievably sweet. And then outside in the street, next to this restaurant, was this road sign up here, India's #1 diabetes center is right here on your left. And there's another one, diabetes specialty center. It's astonishing, right? Of course, related to diabetes is obesity, and the US dietary guidelines. Again, this is association, it's not causality, but the dietary guidelines came out round about here, and obesity went up. This is my home country, so in case you didn't realize, I'm not from Switzerland. I'm South African, and even in South Africa, even in the poor populations, obesity is a huge problem. So this is low income, low, middle, upper, high income. It's going up everywhere. The prevalence of diabetes, this is 1980 to 2014. And then in 2001, we had this data. I don't think the 2000 data was out yet. And basically, there were predictions made around what we thought the 2000 data would be, the 2010, 2020, 2025 data. These are the actual numbers. So in 2006, we hit 246 million globally, and our 2010 prediction was 215. 2020, we thought more than 300 million. We hit that in 2011. And in 2016, we're sitting at 415. It's huge, huge numbers. I think today it's over 500, the last data I saw. And it's not only Western countries. So as a big reinsurer, we reinsure lives around the world. China is a very big growing market. This was a study published a couple of years ago showing, so the top graph is the prevalence of diabetes in men and women, different ages. So if you look at your 60 to 70-year-old Chinese people, this is population, whole population, you are looking at somewhere between 20 and 25% prevalence of diabetes in China, right? Pre-diabetes, so this number's been challenged by some other studies that came in with lower numbers, but if you look at 50 years plus, or even 40 years plus, you're looking at 50 to 60% of the population, of the Chinese population, is pre-diabetic. It's a big population. Okay, so a recent study came out looking at US data. They used the NHANES data in the US. They used the ATP3 criteria for metabolic health, where they didn't use BMI. They looked at waist circumference, glucose, blood pressure, triglycerides, HDL, and not taking any related medication. A healthy person. And what they found was that 88% of all adults were not metabolically healthy. So only 12% of US adults are metabolically healthy. Of people with a normal weight, so of course this is one of the fallacies, well, BMI is all right. Of people with a normal weight, more than 2/3 were not metabolically healthy. With a normal weight, were not metabolically healthy. Of people who were overweight, because they didn't use BMI and only waist circumference, some of them snuck through as being metabolically healthy, so only 8%, and of those obese, obviously different fat distribution, not around the waist, 0.5 are metabolically healthy. So an absolute disaster, right? But have no fear. There are lots of newer drugs out there, right? And so for a long, long time, we only had basically metformin and sulfonylureas. And then we got clever and we started making more and more and more drugs. But what happened? Even though we have more and more drugs, and this is where I come to my, it's unfair. Every 17 seconds in the US, somebody's diagnosed. Every day, 230 Americans will suffer an amputation. In the UK, it's 170 people a week. It's 1 an hour. 1 an hour is having an amputation for a condition that is preventable and reversible. Right? Globally, every 30 seconds, a leg is amputated. It's just shocking. Rate of amputations have increased between 2009 and 2015 in the US. And the increase was especially sharp among young adults and those in the middle age. Yet, so I'm sorry if I'm stealing Virta's presentation, but so this is their latest 2-year data. So Virta Health is a company in the US. They help people reverse their diabetes or put it into remission through ketogenesis. And what you can see, this is I've just got 2 slides on this, and this is the weight. So this is a 1 year, that is at 2 years. And this is about a 10% weight loss, I think. Central abdominal fat reduced, as well as the liver fat that they did ultrasounds on. Systolic blood pressure down, diastolic blood pressure down, liver functions, or liver inflammation down, and high sensitivity C-reactive protein down. This is part of the inflammation that you are getting down. Right, so amazing. And then this is the percent of, so they had 2 groups. This was not a randomized, they had their group which had their intervention, and then they took a random group of people who were similar, who were having traditional care, right? Go to the doctor, have your HbA1c taken, try and control your blood glucose, etc. And what you can see, that's the usual care bunch. And the continuous care intervention was the people that Virta looked at. And if you look at the percentage taking diabetes medications, they began at significantly not different percentages. At 2 years, you're looking at almost half the people are now taking diabetic medications. You look at usual care, it's gone up. You look at insulin dose, the insulin dose there, the insulin dose after 2 years on continuous care intervention, the Virta program, usual care, it's gone up a little bit. if I had a drug that can do this, it would be like magic, right? Here is a drug, but the world's somehow ignoring it. And I'm going to get to why that's happening later on. So Alzheimer's disease, 26 billion pounds annually in the UK. So I'm sure you all, every now and then, look a little bit at the Brexit UK political fiasco. And one of the things now is Boris Johnson saying, well, we're not going to pay our divorce settlement unless we get the deal we want. And the divorce settlement to leave the EU, of course, is 39 billion pounds. So that's 39 billion pounds with this huge, huge divorce deal thing, 26 billion a year, right? That's what Alzheimer's is costing the UK. That's the scale of what it is. They reckon by 2040, it's going to be over 50 billion pounds, right? It's got a higher health and social care cost than cancer and chronic heart disease combined. And by 2018, this study said, which was in 2015, it's going to reach, dementia's going to reach $1 trillion globally, the cost. Huge impact on society. If any of you have had a family member who's had dementia or Alzheimer's, you know what it's like, right? Forget the personal side, just looking after them, the cost of looking after them, what it takes. And then, of course, as the population gets older, as we expect them to, because we're going to be treating them with these great drugs, look what happens after the age of 90 to the incidence of Alzheimer's disease. It goes up a lot, right? So, great, we get people to live older, but we need them to age in a healthy way. Yeah, so I'm not going to read through this, but this was just this paper that came out that basically said, because the fundamental abnormalities in Alzheimer's disease represent effects of brain insulin resistance and deficiency, and the molecular and biochemical consequences overlap with type 1 and type 2 diabetes, we suggest the term type 3 diabetes. And you kind of look at that again, you look at the biological plausibility, and you go, why is this not the biggest thing that we're studying? So why is this so hard, and why is this so complex, right? Because if you take what I've shown you, it's like, okay, well then everyone's going to go home, and everyone's going to be convinced, and everyone's going to let's just research keto, right? Why is it not happening? So I took this picture because in front of the building where I work, you have to print out one of these little papers when you park, and it says what time it expires, right? And if you get there 1 minute late, generally somebody's given you a ticket. And so what happened, I took a photo of this. This chap obviously got a few tickets and got really irritated. And so he left all these on his dashboard. And clearly, if he's actually got the right one there, the person giving tickets has to look through all of this to try and figure out, has he got a valid, or they just go, I'm not going to bother, and go to the next car. So that's creating complexity, right? We don't have to create it. It's done for us, unfortunately. So we've engineered movement out of our lives, right? So, of course, the ketogenic lifestyle, to try and be ketogenic, is not only about food, right? It's also about movement, it's about sleep, and it's about stress. But if you just take movement and sleep, right, we have engineered it out of our lives. So we are becoming more and more insulin resistant, irrespective of what we eat. So I'm doing a talk at the end of the year on modern day addictions. And one of the things I'm looking at is social media, phones, electronic stuff, that sort of thing. And it's not about being personal, whoever this person is. The CEO of Netflix was interviewed, and he said, our 3 biggest competitors for Netflix: Facebook, YouTube, and sleep. Seriously? That's what he said. Right? So the world is trying to get us, because how does social media, how do these things make money? It's time that you spend, because they sell advertising, right? The more time you spend on the apps. So our sleep's being challenged, our movement's being challenged, and of course, then you have the whole nutrition thing. So I thought I'd pop that up there, just in case anybody's not feeling irritated. That is the Lancet article that came out at the end of last year. showing that the hazard ratio for mortality massively goes up when you decrease your energy from carbohydrate, right? And massive weaknesses in the study. But big medical school behind it was Harvard. And of course, what these studies all miss is the fact that this is all just about association. And so anyone in the 80s and 90s who had this little carbohydrate were people that really did not care what any health authority was saying and were extremely unhealthy in all likelihood. And in fact, they found they drank more and they smoked more. How do you adjust for that, right? So the association, it's not causal. There are hundreds of confounders. You can never adjust for all of them. This stuff's generally based on food frequency questionnaires, which are very weak. It's very long term. So if I change my diet today, the impact is decades ahead, right? Whether I'm going to get different diseases or less cancer or whatever it is. There's this healthy user effect. So the people who are following the traditional guidelines tend to be the people that care about themselves, right? And so I love organic food, and I think it's great, but no offense to the mayor, but people who eat organic food, of course they're going to live longer, because those are the people that are in a higher socioeconomic bracket, and they care about themselves, and they're going to go to Pilates and everything else, and they know sleep's important, right? So the question is, how do you tease out it's the organic food or it's everything else? It's the whole person. And it's almost impossible to do that, right? And then lack of funding for expensive RCTs due to a lack of profit motive, which is probably our biggest problem. So there's this assumption bias and repetition-related brainwashing. I don't want to use the word fake, considering how it's been overused in some parts of the world. But there's just this fake information out there. So this is this beautiful thing, article about ketogenic diets and neurodegenerative diseases. And then it says, in this article, in the introduction, to follow a ketogenic diet, it is necessary to introduce drastic changing in eating habits, which are unpalatable and difficult to maintain. So good luck, Josephine, in getting us nice food. So, I mean, that's just unbelievable, right? And then you have things like this. So I showed you this earlier, the healthy aging from the European Union, and then you click on how do you age healthily, or I think it's this one, good practices, and you get to all these different things which are great, physical activity, social inclusion, and then of course you get to diet and nutrition, and you go, oh, what am I going to find? And you click on it, and you get, in addition, dietary fat seems to be associated with various cancers and nutritionally unbalanced diets, which are associated with diabetes and can play a significant role in increasing development of coronary heart disease. And you just want to pull your hair out, right? So, Big Pharma has a lot of money, and I'm not implying here that they should not do this. I think it should just be very transparent. So patient organizations are important for the patients. They help the patients. They create networks. I think it's a good thing, right? And they need to be funded. But the problem is that these patient groups that are funded sit on advisory panels of things like NICE in the UK that decide whether a drug should be used or not. How unbiased are they? How unbiased can you be if you have this financial support from a big organization? And so let's assume I show this presentation to NICE, and the expectation is NICE is just going to go, oh yeah, keto. We've got to get the whole country on keto. But they won't, because we don't have money to get people on advisory panels, right? And that's one of the problems. And then this is like the second last slide. This is just a study that looked at research on checkpoint inhibitors for cancer. So unbelievably clever drugs, right? And you can see that this was in 2015, the number of trials that existed. And you can see in 2017 how these increased. they reckon the market could reach 30 billion euros by 2025. And when you have that amount of money that you potentially could make, the amount of money that you put behind trials is, you can just throw hundreds of millions of euros at these trials, right? And then you have this data at the end. It's double-blind, RCT. Here you go. Taking this saves you or increases your longevity by a year. How do we compete with this? How do we do trials like this on something that is so hard to do? There's a prof cardiology in Canada. He was one of the main authors of the PURE trial, and he is very much wanting to do a trial on salt. He wants to show that salt, whether salt has a harm or not. And he wants to try and create essentially closed-off community limiting their salt intake and another group not limiting their salt. How do you do that? If I went to everybody here and said, right, every day from now on, for the next 5-10 years, you're only allowed X grams of salt a day. How are you going to manage that, right? It's almost impossible. So something simple like testing one thing like salt is almost impossible. But the only way he can consider doing it is using populations in jail. Seriously, because then you limit what they eat. But of course, if somebody really wants the taste of salt, you probably get it from outside. So even there, it's hard. So it's a really difficult thing to do with nutrition. So who will benefit from keto science? People, patients, and their families, society as a whole, public health systems like the NHS. In Europe, lots of health systems are public, right? They're free at point of care. And then, of course, carriers of mortality and morbidity risk, which is where Swiss Re comes in. And you'll hear more about that tomorrow. And final word, I really just want to thank Josephine again for you're amazing. And over hopefully a keto meal this week, you can find out what Josephine's background is and what she did. And she and her husband did amazing things in Bavaria and produced magic there as well. So thanks very much. Thank you.